Okay, I'm gonna keep running. So now on a previous series I did, I'm not, I don't recall which one it was. I was actually citing a trainee, a fellow trainee in a cohort for when I was being trained as a city bus driver about 2 years ago. I was in a training, and this person was like, he identified himself as a former ethical hacker. He's like, so he's just kind of flexing a little bit that he had some skills about hacking, but he was helping all of us open our accounts where we were gonna start getting paid. Like we had to do like a certain kind of email and stuff like that at a new job, and he knew a thing or two about computers, but he had a pet peeve about cars. He thought that cars are bad. Cars are the devil to him, even though we're being trained to drive, but we were actually being trained for city bus driving, which helps people dispense with cars. And when I was with that company, they were saying that the some of the intention is to make the city more and more like green and like less reliant on cars. Is actually part of the infrastructure, the intentions. And where I'm at, I've said in other videos that the model, some of the infrastructure is very strong, as a cultural value in the area where I'm at in the United States, and some of their implements about like having buses drive on the shoulder of the road during traffic, that have been pioneered in this region and then replicated in other areas. So you could say that from that standpoint, the model, the intention of getting the city more and more efficient and less reliant on automobiles, would maybe constitute perhaps a motion for the larger country, if you just appreciate the fact that this area has been replicated in terms of infrastructure. I would say that this area excels around infrastructure and education as cultural values, and so I think all regions have different things that they win with. But he thought that cars are the devil, but I think that there's actually a lot to that, because so like a lot of times you hear the word automobile, you just hear auto, and you immediately think of a vehicle when you hear auto. But I was reading a book about cars that I had got in high school, and I don't think I was supposed to. I might have had access to the book a little bit longer than I should have when I was in that class, because I should have brought it back sooner. But that book starts out by saying that automobile means self-mobile. The word auto implies self. Just simply auto means self, like autonomous, auto suggestion, auto this. Auto means self. That's like, I think that might be it sounds German. It might be, but I don't know. I don't that'd be fake news, false information if I just start doing the word history and the etymology of something, not knowing what the etymology is. But it sounds a little bit auto. I'm a German, but I think that auto means self, and so you could almost say that all that is wrong. If there is something wrong with the earth and cultures abroad, which the United States is very influential economically, socially, politically. It has been for centuries now, for at least the last few centuries. It predicates at least the modern paradigm upon the automobile. I made in that statement with that same trainee that I had read a book. I think it was that same book that the modeling and the layout and the spread out of the United States is deeply revolves around the automobile, especially like the 50s, like the sprawling suburbs and the baby boom. Even to this day, if you struggle with transportation, like having your own vehicle, that can really injure a person, because even as we've getting onto technology, the infrastructure and the layout is still part of that, a feature and function of that older iteration, and so it hasn't come all the way on board with where technology is at. So if you have a limitation in transportation, it can really affect your bottom line quickly, as it did for me, especially since I draw income using an automobile. But he said, no, sir. Actually, the country was laid out for trains, sir. And I think if you go back several hundreds of years, he would probably be correct about that. So maybe the broader spread out and layout that informs the more local and regional layout is probably a function of being facilitating train networks going in the past. So he wouldn't be wrong with that. But the automobile is still very significant. And then if you think about like and then also a lot of our detriment as the earth now as humans, but also locally, like in Western societies, is a function of individualism. I would say a lot of what we suffer is a function of individualism, such as our struggles around self-image, because your self-image is more so daunting and challenging and punishing to cause grief if you are appreciating yourself as an individual that is separate from a community and from others. But if you look at yourself as part of this existence, you can sustain a lot setback. Even I would say, I would dare say sickness. Not that sickness is ever easy to undergo, but you can handle it as it can be handled by appreciating that you are a member of something greater than what you are. And there's nothing lost in love in life in the greatest sense. Um, but 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 I think that, so what are we really preoccupied with to this day, like as human beings, like from evolutionary psychology, is like appreciating our mental values and propensities along the realities of the rigors of existing for our ancestors to the present day, and there's no real delineation or breach between that reality and congruence from the ancestral point to the period, the present, to my taste. What would be significant as evolutionary psychology values and interests of human beings would be fighting, fleeing, feeding, and fornicating would be chief among those. Within all of that, fire would be significant, I think. And then what would make that redeeming or damning all of that would be the sense of individualism. Would, maybe you could say, what is the difference between any society and another? Part of it might be the sense of the concept of an individual and the experience of that concept within a group, because you can't have a life without the implications of a group. For human beings, that had been the case in the past and is still the case. But our understanding and appreciation of that is sense of duties, identity, and interest in what we really want to contribute. That's what we want. A lot of us want to contribute on the deepest level is what we want, but how we go about that, it varies, and it is a function of our sense of identity, no less than our sense of self, and how there's a little bit of play in that, and that can be mitigated and managed and bolstered to a person's strong suit or not. And so you have all that in the automobile, because the automobile, a lot of the most, whatever you see like in themes of like culture, like about like very violent things in media, cool sexy experiences, like just get, and then the food that would go with all that, and then fleeing, if we think about it, because a lot of times when we're going up and down the car, like or down the road, and we don't appreciate it, but we're also fleeing from different stuff. And then you have the, within the engine of that is fire in the engine of that. And so we're completely infatuated and we're infatuated with ourselves. We're infatuated with fire, and we're infatuated with fighting, fleeing, fornicating, and fleeing. But we might not appreciate fleeing as that is very important to us. We wouldn't probably fancy that as being an interest and a passion, but it's a lot of what we're preoccupied with. It might be a negative interest and a negative passion is fleeing from things, and that's all going on with the automobile. But I want to say that a lot of that, it revolves back around like food. So what can you imagine about how much of your lifestyle and your attitudes about food are around cars, have something to do with cars, either being delivered to you with a car, or you accessing with the car, or you shopping with the car. A car is very significant in all of that. I would say a lot of violence is attended by cars, like serious heinous violence. There would be implications of cars with that. A lot of implications of when and where and how fornicating is viable for, or just sexual activity is viable for humans, would be attended by transportation in cars. And so stuff like that. And then like fleeing also, because a lot of us, we don't want to be walking places on foot. I actually nearby got into some very significant danger while on foot recently, and but when by wanting to avoid that would be to want to use a car. And a lot of times when we're in a car, we want to avoid the vulnerability of being on foot in the locations that would put us in while being on foot. So that can be appreciated as fleeing. But I want to say that, but also a lot of the problems with the Earth system, the viability of life on Earth, would be appreciated as a detriment of that is a car. Our consumption of fossil fuels using vehicles is actually an imminent existential threat to the potential of life on Earth. I talked to a very brilliant, very intelligent person of a nondescript job occupation, that was the non-description was necessitated by the scope and activity, and he was saying he had a legitimate concern. He understood a lot of things about life that wouldn't be a civilian wouldn't be privy to, and he had serious misgivings about the viability of life in 5, 10, and 300 years. A lot of that would be around cars, to my taste. So I want to just that's where I was going with this series, and I'm gonna try and do 1 or 2 more.